All right. Well, I'm happy to see everyone. This week we're going to continue our conversation about texturing. Now that we have some experience working inside of Substance Painter, and hopefully the Jade Toad kind of little miniature assignment was fun, allowed you to start kind of getting some exposure and some experience working inside Substance Painter.
I'm still getting that Stardust thing happening whenever I render.
And that's likely. And there's a lot of render parameters that we... iRay is... It likes a lot of rays, and it likes a really long render time in order to get rid of a lot of those bugs. Yeah, it's a progressive render. So the longer it sits and evaluates, the cleaner your render is going to be.
I accidentally would zoom in and zoom out with my trackpad, and it would restart on its own.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, I left it on 25 minutes. That's
And
like the standard.
I think I would like to encourage a framework for our thinking here as to the role and the purpose of iRay. This is not a production renderer.
What do you recommend for the I forgot what it's called. You can put it for the samples. So it automatically sets from minimum 5 to automatically 1,000.
Yeah.
What do you think is
Well, how much time do you have?
highest should put?
How much time do you have? That's really the question you got to ask yourself. And that's
What's beauty?
yeah, exactly. And that's the framework that iRay kind of thinks within.
Making it go slow.
Yeah. Yep. And that's not a bad thing. It's the whole idea behind iRay is that it's a progressive renderer. You hit the go button, and then it's just going to take that bucket of time or that bucket of samples and do the best that it can do. It's going to try to draw the best picture that it can draw inside those parameters, right? So it's not really a production grade renderer. It's really something that you'd use just to kind of show someone how it's all working together, right? It's part of our pipeline, but it doesn't have a real major kind of connection to where we are going to end, which is going to be a real-time rendering engine, right? It's an intermediary step that will allow you to very quickly, throw a version of your textures to your concept designer or maybe your art director on your team, just to kind of show them what the current state of things are going to be. If you really wanted good production grade photographs, you're going to take it somewhere else. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. It's a simple rendering engine that takes a lot of finessing to get good results out of.
I forgot how to turn the background on the environment. I forgot how to turn it on.
We can go over that again. Yeah, it's no problem. It's real easy to get that up and running. Okay, so today our big target is to take that experience that we learned last week with working in Substance Painter and apply it to our own character model, okay? By this time in the sequence of the production of our art asset, you should have everything retopologized by now, right? And most importantly, you should have everything UV mapped, okay? Those are two required steps for the texturing stage. And I think by now everyone's kind of caught up. I know retopologizing and UV mapping can take some energy, okay? I'm hoping that everyone is caught up by now and we can start advancing into our sequence and finish out the textures for this project, right? This is the last part of this human character model. So we are in earnest going to move on to a different project. People are like, yes, I'm done. Yeah, it's important that we move on. We're going to start looking at some other things here very, very quickly going forward in the future. Next week, we're going to build a treasure chest, which is going to be a lot of fun. It'll allow us to combine some of our hard surface skills and our organic modeling skills we learned in Mudbox and kind of marry them together in a really cool way. More on that next week, okay? But today we need to get things out of Maya and over into Substance Painter. And there's some really direct considerations that we need to keep in mind when we're sending data to and from. There's a couple important kind of technical things in the back end of Maya that we need to ensure has happened in order for the translation of this information to go clean. In addition, we also have to look at the export properties of the FBX file format so we then can cleanly import our character model over into Substance Painter. This I/O, input-output conversation is important, okay? A lot of this back-end stuff has a direct impact on what we're going to end up using over in the Substance Painter, okay? So here's what we're going to do. Let me just launch Maya real fast, and we're going to get to work. Drives me crazy how long it takes Maya to launch. While Maya just starts to hum to life here, one of the things that's really exciting to see coming out of Game Developers Conference this week are all the announcements coming from Algorithmic, the developers of Substance Painter and Substance Designer. You definitely want to check out, I think it was yesterday they had Substance Day, which was kind of their big media event in which they announced and showcased a lot of their updates to both Painter and Designer. So go check it out. There's a lot of good stuff happening in this world. It's very exciting to see this coming year's kind of iteration of all these apps that we very, very lovingly use. So I think what I'm going to do is start off with my little Triceratops, because there's a couple of things in here that my little Triceratops model will facilitate, a couple conversation points. Let's go snag it real fast. All right. Okie dokie day. So if you look at the model here, okay, look at the model. Things are looking pretty good. It's all been retopologized. I've UV mapped the entirety of this character. Things are starting to look and kind of hum to life the way I want them to. Let me just kind of take you on a tour specifically of what the back end of this project looks like, because in every sense, I think it speaks very directly to where your project is likely to have landed as well. Okay? Of course, naturally, I want to hide this. Control H, Shift H to unhide. This is the unmapped. When it goes green like that, that really just means that it doesn't have a material assigned to those polygons. So I just kind of threw on a simple material. So this is where I began, right? This is the beginning of my entire sculpting process, or excuse me, the end of my sculpting process and the beginning of my retopologizing process. So this is what came in for my sculpting app, okay? Looking pretty good. There's a lot of really great detail in here. I'm bringing you close into the mouth here just to kind of show you some of the detail that I physically sculpted into the mesh itself, okay? Because there's a lot of stuff in there, especially look around the nostril area. There's some really great wrinkles that I sculpted in. It isn't crazy high resolution, okay? That's by design. It's what I would call a kind of a, it's got all the secondary forms in the sculptor world. That's kind of what we think about, secondary forms. The primary forms are the block out of the basic shapes. The secondary forms are kind of like the next layer in. And then the tertiary forms, that's like every scale, every wrinkle, every scratch and stuff. I only kind of sculpted to the secondary forms on this model. But I bring this to your attention just to kind of show you what the retopologized model looks like in comparison to this fella here. Okay, so I'm going to hit Shift H or Control H to hide the high resolution, Shift H to unhide, and look very carefully back here at the nostril, the details in the folds in the mouth. There's a lot of information in there that's just been lost by the retopologizing process, okay? That's by design. We're going to want to keep and have this, the high resolution mesh hang around for a little bit. We're going to continue to use this high resolution mesh inside of our texture process, and I'll show you in a second what this looks like. It's called mesh maps, okay? And we're going to extract a lot of that lovely high resolution detail that we sculpted, and it's going to be baked into some texture maps over in Substance Painter. So this high resolution sculpt still is going to play a very direct, important role inside of our entire texturing pipeline. More on that in a minute, okay? With my low resolution Triceratops already sculpted, now we have something that we can start really evaluating and getting prepped and ready to go over into Substance Painter. So, two things that we very clearly and quickly need to evaluate. UV maps. I spent some time making all my UVs. Let's just take a good look at here. Here's the UV editor. I'm going to select my object in the background. Yeah, there's all my UVs. Things are looking pretty good, okay? If I throw my little checker pattern on, I can see how it's starting to work inside. Oops, didn't deselect it. And what I'm looking for here, and luckily for us, the layout command inside of our UV editor and our UV tools does this for us, is that I'm trying to ensure that the size of all the checkers are kind of the same. Because if the checker pattern is consistent, and the size of the checker pattern is consistent across the entirety of the mesh, now we know that all of my UV islands are in the same scale and proportion to each other. That we're going to get a consistent level of quality across the entirety of our mesh, which is, yay, we like that, right? We don't want to have one part of our mesh be of higher quality than another part. We want it to all be kind of an equal part quality, right? And I'm not saying lesser, I'm saying equal, right, in finger quotes, because it's kind of a moving target as to what equal is. The optimization of your textures is going to help determine what that resolution is, right? It's going to be a 4K texture, 2K texture. How many pixels are we going to use to describe the details of my mesh? And things are looking pretty good here, okay? Now the next thing that we have to do, and we spent some time, a lot of time talking about UV mapping. We'll do some more UV mapping on our next project, the treasure chest, so we'll come back and explore that here again starting next week, okay? But the thing that I want to start introducing today are the role of hard and soft edges, okay? So there's really kind of two things that we need to do. UV maps, hard and soft edges, okay? Or, excuse me, three things, and then materials, okay? It's kind of like a little checklist for us as we go through this process. Make sure we got UV maps. Analyze all the surfaces for hard and soft edges, more on that in a minute. And then, of course, we need to group our textures by materials. Again, more on that in a minute. Let's just write that down so we can have a checklist. And after a while, you'll get some muscle memory on this kind of checklist, if you will. So UV maps, do I have them? Is it UV'd? Do I have hard and soft edges? Let's do hard, soft. Come on in, Dom. And then materials. Okay. That's our checklist. This is looking like a pre-flight checklist now that we're trying to send this specific model over out into Substance Painter, okay? And there's some things that we honestly need to consider here and look at, because how we walk through this little checklist is going to directly determine how we're able to texture over in Substance Painter, right? There's a relationship between these two apps that we need to meet. Well, I already got everything UV'd. If we do a quick eval of my UVs, okay? Let's turn off the checker pattern. Things are looking pretty good. What I'm looking for here is just any islands that are crossed. I got a lot of parts and pieces on this mesh, and I mean a lot of parts and pieces on this mesh. So, yep, things are looking good. This checker pattern, has a role. Okay, I like to load in my own checker pattern, but at the very least, this is a good place to begin. All right, so UVs, check, done. Now the next thing we need to check are these hard and soft edges. Now I want to draw your attention to kind of the front horn on my little Triceratops here. Now look at how the light and how the computer is shading across all these polygons, okay? Specifically, right there. How's it look? Now remember, we have kind of like the snout of my Triceratops, and then a horn is supposed to be coming out of those polygons down there, right? How does this look? It's blended together, absolutely. And specifically, if you look at the way the computer is choosing to shade all of this, okay, you can see that the polygons, the computer is shading across all of these polygons. It's almost treating all those polygons as one polygon, and the light is very smoothly transitioning across all of these surfaces, right? This has everything to do with what's called the smoothing angle, right? The angle of all the geometry is within a certain range, so the shading engine is smoothing across all of those polygons as if it's one, right? Well, I want to have the illusion that, that these are two separate objects, okay? The horn and then the skin are separate pieces, right? They're not, in fact, separate pieces. It's all one contiguous polygon. If I was to select the geometry, you can see pretty quickly that this is all one big mega shape. Yep. It's all glued together, but I want to create the illusion that there's a hard edge in between these two pieces, right? I want to tell the computer to stop shading all of those polygons as one, right? And treat a boundary as kind of it should treat an edge segment as a boundary between two different groups, okay? So let's just do it real fast. Let me show you what it looks like. I'm going to go into my edge selection state, and I double-clicked on the edge loop that represents the boundary between the horn and the skin itself. Now watch what happens here. It's pretty magical. We've been experimenting around with this a little bit before. This has been a technical bug that we have been smashing. When you were doing some mirroring and some bridging earlier on in this project, there was some really odd shading going on. And our solution was just to grab all the edges and tell the computer that they were soft edges, right? That they were all, the smoothing should be pretty consistent across all those polygons. And we found that option up here in Mesh Display, right? Hard edge, soft edge, okay? Now the default, well, not the default, but more than likely, the computer is going to automatically assign a soft edge kind of smoothing parameter, if you will, to all the edges on our mesh. More than likely. We've seen that sometimes it doesn't, but we want to use these hard edges to our advantage, okay? I've just clicked the hard edge option, and if I deselect the mesh, we can already start to see the big impact that one small little change has on the illusion that we're trying to craft. Can you guys see it? Now that big, huge specular highlight isn't going across all the geometry. It's treating this as the boundary of one of those pieces. Okay, so we've told the computer to stop shading these polygons right here at this edge. Okay, so this is seen as a group, and this is seen as a group. Okay, it allows us to very quickly start visually separating these parts and pieces out from the smoothing algorithm, or excuse me, the shading algorithm, with this simple shape. All right, so I'm just going to go back in time. There it is. So here's with it all smoothed out, and then with that hard edge applied. And that's a pretty big noticeable difference between the two. Now, with that hard edge applied, you know, right there, we're beginning to craft the illusion that we're trying to craft, okay? These are the little things that really make our texture shine, excuse me. No pun intended for this part, right? So at this point, I'm going to start going in and really evaluating my mesh on a per kind of boundary basis and ask myself, okay, what do I want the smoothing angle and the smoothing kind of illusion to separate out for me automatically, right? We don't have to have these be discontiguous pieces. We can very quickly go in and assign these hard edges to get what we're after, which is pretty rad. Yeah, I would probably, looks like this one down here. Let's do the same thing on all of this. See how it smooths across here? I'm going to assign those as a hard edge. Voila. If we deselect it, yeah, now it looks, now there's a, now there is this implicit boundary between these two pieces that kind of serves the purpose of creating a horn kind of illusion, like that this piece is stuck into the skin. Check it out down here, right? Let me get my gimbal going. Okay. Yeah, you can really see it well down over here. It doesn't look like this part has been kind of glued into the bottom jaw, the bottom mandible of our little dinosaur. So just selecting the edges and physically creating that boundary is going to help me get the illusion that I'm after. And I think what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change it up here. Let's make sure I didn't have my symmetry on, and that was my mistake. All right, let's assign the hard edge. Yep, and now I'm starting to get the illusion that I'm after, specifically right in there. It's starting to feel a little bit more separated out, which is pretty cool. And I would continue to do that across the entirety of my mesh, okay? I think the horns up here are pretty good. Oh, in the back we lose it. See how we're losing definition between and smoothing out the shading between those polygons in here? Let's just do it real fast. Luckily, it just takes but a second. Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Me likey very much. And now I'm ready to go. Okay. I would evaluate the entirety of my mesh using this sequence. Okay. It's an important part, one that's going to definitely come home to roost, next week when we start doing hard surface stuff even more, because we want to stop the smoothing angle at certain boundaries of our mesh to ensure that it's flowing the way we want it. So UVs, done. Hard and soft edges, done. Okay. Now, this is the part that we can't overlook, okay, is the materials. And I want to show you a couple things. I'm going to intentionally kind of do things wrong just to show you what it looks like over in Substance Painter, okay? When we export out our geometry here from Maya, the material that's associated with the polygon is then going to turn into a texture set over inside of Substance Painter. And let me show you what that looks like. Often here in Maya, we'll have 8 or 9 different materials applied to our geometry, right? Well, at the end of the day here, my big goal is that I want to have one texture set. So one, basically kind of a group of 4 images that are responsible for shading and creating the surface illusion for this one dinosaur, right? I don't want, because for every material is going to turn into 4 different images on the back end, okay? So I got to manage this, and I got to make sure that I'm working the way that I would like to work and creating what I need at the end of this process, okay? So I want to intentionally break it so you guys can see specifically how this looks. So I'm going to go into my Hypershade real fast, and I have Triceratops. This is the material that's applied to basically everything. But let's just add in a couple more. Here, we'll just do a whole bunch of, looks like Arnold is turned off at the moment, but that's okay. We'll just do a whole bunch of blends, okay? Name this blend horns. We'll add in another blend. This blend 3 will be the toes. Maybe we want the toes to look a little different. And lastly, we'll blend 4, we'll name to eyes, or yes. There we go. All right. To make it really, really easy what's going on here, I'm just going to color code this. The horns are going to be red. The toes, well, they got to be green. The eyes, I want demon eyes. Let's make them magenta. And Lambert 1, we'll just put it to yellow. I'm not even sure if we're going to use Lambert 1. Okay, so let's get into it a little bit. So now I need to go in. I'm going to go in and assign those materials to different parts of my body here. Obviously, the horns material is going to get applied to the horns. Let's just do that real fast. Okay, let's turn on some symmetry inside of mine to make sure this works a little bit faster. There we go. Looks like I missed one. There it is. Shift period expands my selection. I'll right click on the polygons and assign existing material of horns to the selection. There we go. Do the same thing for this top guy here. Here's horns. Luckily the eyes are all discontiguous. I can just double click on them. That's going to go to eyes. That's lovely. Let's get all this mumbo jumbo tagged in here. Shift period. Oops. Since this is taking forever, maybe I will only do a couple of these. I understand it very directly. This is like watching paint dry. This is not what we came to class to do. Let's just do that. All right. Oh, aren't they lovely green toes? Look at that. That's wonderful, right? I have like a little clown triceratops today, right? Okay, so I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3. I have 4 materials at play here. I've assigned 4 different groups of polygons to 4 different materials in the hypershade inside of Maya, okay? Now remember, this is an illustration of how this system works. The polygons that are assigned to a material are going to be separated out inside a Substance Painter. Now at times it's a good thing. Oftentimes it's not, right? Because every texture set in Substance Painter is going to turn into at least 4 images that we now have to integrate into our texturing pipeline over in Unity, Unreal, or back here in Maya, okay? So it's not, we're not creating 1 image in Substance Painter. We're actually going to pipe out about 4, at least 4, sometimes even 6, depending on how we choose to do it, okay? So we got to be mindful of this. This is a big consideration. So let's export this thing out real fast and see what this looks like over in Substance Painter. I'm going to get the Substance engine just kind of going real fast while I export my model. Now, when we're exporting geometry from Maya, we want to ensure that we're not exporting. Let me rephrase that. We want to ensure that we're only exporting the geometry. I don't want the lights. I don't want the cameras. I don't want the animations. I just want the geometry to flow into Substance Painter. Okay? So there's a couple ways that we can go about doing this. First and foremost, the easiest way is just to select the object that you're trying to export, and then from the File menu, choose Export Selected. And that's what I'm going to do. There we go. I got my object. I can also just select it right there. And then naturally, under the File pull-down menu, we're going to choose Export Selection. Not export all, because that's going to put the lights, the cameras, the default lights, everything that's in your outliner will be saved and packaged into that FBX file. It's one of the powerful things about the FBX file is that it packages all that stuff up together into a nice little briefcase. But we just want to have the geometry. Okay? I get really grumpy out there in the professional world when someone sends me a model file that's got all the other junk of the scene file in it as well. And it's like, I don't want to have to deal with the 8 directional lights that you put in your scene, you know, just give me the geometry, right? Let's do export selection. I'm going to hit the option box to give us an opportunity to look at the export properties, okay? Now, Substance, it's all about the FBX file, right? It's the only file type it takes. Actually, I take that back. I think it also takes OBJ files, okay? But we're going to use the FBX file format. It's the strongest. It's the most widely supported and adopted out there in the real world, so we got to get used to working with them. The FBX file format, does anyone, I don't remember if I've mentioned this before, does anyone know what FBX stands for? You say freaking big something, I like it, that works for me. Kinda, actually stands for film box, right? There was a wonderful piece of technology that Autodesk acquired a number of years ago called Filmbox, right? Which then turned into Motion Builder. It used to be it still is one of their motion capture applications. And so it's kind of a legacy term from yesteryear that, for whatever reason, that seems to have stuck in my brain, Filmbox. Anyway, all right. Okay, so we're going to use the FBX file format. I don't believe this is the default. I think OBJ is the default, so make sure you're changing it to FBX export in this pull-down menu. Now, a lot of this other stuff you can just leave off, okay? We're going to get to this preset stuff here in a minute. We don't want to save the thumbnail and the play blast. We just want to save and close. Oops, excuse me. Oops, I didn't actually export it. I'm sorry. I just saved the settings and I closed the window. Let's actually export it. Now, and this is where we need to pay attention because I want to put this on my desktop here real fast, and we'll call this Triceratops wrong. Okay? And over here, this is the part of the FBX export process that we need to pay the most attention to. Okay? Because this has the specific export properties of the format itself. Okay, and there are a couple things in here that we need to see, we need to ensure is enabled. Now I'm in the file type specific options here and under the geometry section, okay, because we want to include the geometry. Yeah, let me just close all this up. There we go. So we're in the file type specific options and then include, okay, geometry. We want to include the smoothing groups. That's going to honor all those hard and soft edges that we just created, right? With that option checked off, all that work is just going to go poof, go away, right? It's not going to be included in the file itself, okay? You can also do tangents and binormals. We'll come back and talk about that here in a minute. We certainly do not want to triangulate the mesh, okay? So at the very least, save your smoothing groups and hit smooth mesh on its way out. Our surfaces don't have any NURB surfaces in it, so we don't need to convert anything, nor would you want to do that now anyways. That's just dangerous. Also, in the animation section, turn off animation. We don't want any animation. We don't want cameras. We don't want the lights. We don't want any audio. We just want the geometry. Yep. All right, and that's good to go. All right, make sure you know what you're calling it. Give it a good location. I'm putting mine on my desktop. Mission accomplished. All right. Okie dokie. Let's look at what we got here. So, dun, dun, dun. Did I save it to my desktop? Oh, I probably didn't save it to my desktop. All right, let's try that again. I was so sure that I saved it to my desktop. Oh, it's right there. I'm just, see, this is how much I look for the icon. I was looking for the green Maya icon and not the yellow Moto icon that visually I just overlooked it. Thank you for, golly, that's going to be a muscle memory that's going to be difficult for me to get past, right? All right, so here's the FBX file format. Don't worry about the icon. The icon is just related to the file format. The Mac OS sees us opening FBX files more in Moto than it does in Maya, so it's putting the Moto icon on the file itself. So it's not an indication that it's not going to work. All right, so over here in Substance Painter, let's start a new project file, okay? Let's see how this works. So if we start a new project file, this is what we get, okay? Now we need to select the first thing. You're just going to kind of start at the top, work all the way down towards the bottom. The first thing that you need to do is you need to select the file that we just exported from Maya, right? There it is. We don't want to import the cameras. They shouldn't be in the FBX file to start with, so we should be okay. And then the document resolution, this is going to be the size in pixels of the series of images that Substance Painter is going to create for us, okay? 2048 by 2048, that's a good starting point for this generation. There was a time when 1K was the ceiling. Now 2K is kind of where we are and in our real-time capacity. So I think this is a good starting point. You can increase this, but I wouldn't increase this much. Okay, you can create 4K textures. I make 4K textures all the time, but it's for the most part, it's like if you're making a 4K texture, there has to be a really good darn reason for it, okay? All right, so we're gonna leave this at 2048. Okay, normal map format. This is important for us on the Mac. We use the OpenGL, architecture for our graphics library, okay? So please make sure the normal map format is set to OpenGL. If it's set to DirectX, there's a lot of functionality of Substance Painter that's going to be misread by this one important thing. So just make sure it's on OpenGL for us on the Mac. Now, if you're creating substances for Mac and PC, we have to have a different conversation, right? But we're going to be entirely Mac-based in this class. If you're working at home, put this at DirectX, okay? All right.
So if we're going to want to work on something at home and then transfer it back and forth, that's a situation.
There's going to be some problems with that. Yeah, there's going to be some problems with it. It's not that it's not going to work. The illusion is just going to be different. Yeah, how the DirectX graphics library looks at normal maps is different than how OpenGL does it. The colors are different, so the output is a little bit different. someone once described it to me as like, DirectX and OpenGL are similar, but there are some differences. I think the comparison, it's like Spanish and Portuguese. They are similar, but they are still very different, right? The languages are similar, but there are still some very big differences. We're on OpenGL here in the Mac, so I'm going to choose that. And then OK. All right. Now it's going to sit and think for a second here. There's my model. Yahoo! You can zoom in, take a look-see at it. Looking pretty great. Now the model over here inside of Substance looks identical as the way the model looked over inside of Maya. Yay! Congratulations, you've done it, right? You've gone from one app to another and everything is cleanly traveling between them. Before we get into the details, let's examine the impact of those hard and soft edges. Yeah, look, my horns are still working the way that I want to, which is yay for me. Okay, that looks good. The boundaries of the horns up there look good. Down there looks good. So everything has come into Substance Painter the exact same way that I was looking them to do. So I'm really happy about that. Although I have some hard and soft edge problems showing up here on my neck, something that I should go back and revisit. Okay, we'll come back and do that here in a second. I really do an honest evaluation of how the model looks here in Substance before I even start texture painting, because now is a good time to fix some problems, right? Now is an excellent time to fix some problems that maybe we didn't notice over inside of Maya. Since we're working with a different rendering engine, we're going to see things naturally very different than the way we did over inside of Maya. Okay, so let's get back. Yeah, look at the facets on my little horns up here at the top. I absolutely need to revisit all those horns back in Maya and change them to what? All the edges. Soft, right? Because we're not smoothing across all the polygons. We're shading each, or we're smoothing each polygon individually, which is creating this really kind of faceted look, almost as if it was like a diamond or something, right? I don't want that. By changing all those edges to soft, then the smoothing algorithm, the shading algorithm for the material is going to shade across all the polygons instead of stopping at the boundaries of each. So I got some work in here that I need to do. Luckily, I intentionally did this wrong, so we'll have an opportunity to revisit our file back in Maya and fix these bugs. Now, I want to show you over here the impact of all of those materials that we made over in Maya, right? So whenever we assign an independent material to some polygons in Maya, and then send that file over here into Substance Painter, this is what we're generating. We're creating a texture set for each material, okay? Now, at times, this can be a benefit to our production pipeline, but for me, what I want is I have one model with one texture set, okay? Right now, as is, I have one model with 4 texture sets. So at the output of this entire texturing stage, I'm going to be generating 16 individual textures that now have to be mapped back onto my model over in Unity or Unreal or back in Maya. Thumbs down. Way thumbs down. Okay? No likey. This is a fast way of making your the load really heavy. Okay? When you hear game developers talk about optimization, this kind of gets into that conversation. Because the more individual assets that we're asking the computer to manage while we're trying to draw all of these objects in real time, the longer it's going to take for the computer to process all of that, right? If you take a step back and look at what we're doing here, at the large scale of real-time rendering, we're asking the computer to manage thousands of individual assets and individual media files. So the more optimized and the more efficient in the creation of our art assets, can't talk today, I apologize, the better the game is going to run, okay? So I got some problems in here. I want to get it down to one, okay? So let's take this as an opportunity. Let's run back over into Maya real fast, and I'm going to show you a great little trick, okay? All right, so first things first, goodbye, clown dinosaur, okay? goodbye, right? I love you, but I don't love you. Luckily for us, the solution to our problem is really, really easy. To get it all back into one material, just have the darn thing selected in object mode and then assign a singular material to that object, okay? Huh? Lambert 1. I'll do Lambert 1 just to do it. Why not, right? So here's Lambert 1. I can just drag it on there. Now it's all yellow. Oof. Luckily, the details of our materials don't flow into substance. It's just the material tag, okay? That's what it's doing. It's kind of like tagging each polygon and saying, this material is influencing these polygons. This other material is influencing these over here. And substance is looking at those tags as a way to filter and create different texture sets according to those tags. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, he would be eaten pretty quickly. I'm just going to put my Triceratops. I can't deal with the yellow. And since we're here, let's just fix some of those problems with the hard and soft edges. Substance Painter, and I can even see it here to a certain degree. I got some work in here that I need to do. Whoops. Okay. Let's just fix it real fast. Looks like it's right around a boundary loop, which is really easy to fix. This is likely to come from the UVs, the boundaries of my UVs. Let's soften that edge. Yep, there it is. Now it's back to the way I had it. Same with all of these fellers, my horns. There we go.
Those are separate polygonal objects. Did you do that in the retopolization stage or in the initial?
Both. Both. Yeah, I didn't combine those in because I didn't need to. It would have made the resolution of the mesh much heavier on the sail, if you will, than it needed to be. And I was trying to keep this kind of manageable in its polygonal weight. We don't have to have it all be one piece, right? One contiguous polygon. We can start separating these things out a little bit. We want to be strategic in how we're doing it. Yeah, you know, I think for these horns in here, they're pretty big. They're going to be connected. For the little horns that are just pushed into the sail, those can be separate pieces.
If this had been a carnivore or something, would you have tried to do teeth in the mouth as separate pieces?
Yeah.
Solely due to them being difficult to sort of get to flow in the mouth?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, let's soften these up. You can actually do it in polygons as well. You don't have to do it in edge selections. It's going to look at the selected edges when you run the command. So let's just do soften edges. Yeah, look at that. Wonderful. Much better. Much better. Now the computer is smoothing and shading across those horns at the top much differently than what we had before. So that was time well spent, in my opinion, and I'm getting the illusion that I'm after. Okay, those are the big culprits. I may have a couple. Yep, I got some other hard edges in here. Let me just snag those real fast. Yep, that's good. Got another one here. And these things just kind of happen, you know. It's of no fault of mine or the computer. They just happen when things get retopologized, when you're UV mapping. The computer just gets confused as to which like edge tag has been assigned to these parts of the mesh. There we go. That seemed to fix my problems. I got another one down here, but I'm actually happy with that. Oh, look at all these. Yeah, these. Ugh, gotta fix these. Golly. Here, let's just do this. I'm getting lazy. There it is. Okay, I missed it. Let's get all those guys too. Actually, let's do this. I'm just gonna grab the back half here. That works. All this is, oops. That's good enough for me. For what we're doing right now, I'm happy camper. Okay, no, I'm not a happy camper. Golly, I hate being me sometimes. All right, that was honestly the last ones I was going to do. All right, now I'm done. I'm done. Okay, I'm ready to export this. And I got to export this before I keep going, okay? So let's select the object, send it back over into Substance Painter and see how it's all working. Okay, File, Export Selection. I always just double check. Yep. I'm going to overwrite the file. Yeah, I'm going to overwrite it. That way I don't have 1,000 files sitting on my desktop. Now, there's a couple things in here that you can do. Of course, naturally, in Substance Painter, just File New. You can go through this entire process again. Cool with that. That's a great way of kind of rebooting. Sometimes, however, there's one other option. If you go into the Edit pull-down menu, we have an option here called Project Configuration, which will allow you to reload the mesh or redirect the mesh to, in my case, the same file. Let's see. Yep. See how all my hard and soft edges kind of blinked out right there? Because it reloaded the mesh for me real quick, and I'm able to start working. However, I'm going to have to create a new file because, look, it still has all these texture sets, these unused texture sets in here. I don't want that. So let's start a new file. So we'll start here. Triceratops wrong. Don't want a camera. We don't want to create texture sets per UDIM tiles. That's much more advanced. And all of this looks good. And hit OK. Voila. And now I'm ready to start painting. As I very quickly evaluate, the horns look good, missed a hard edge there, and some other places. Okay. I'm going to call this acceptable for instruction today. So all of this in the OpenGL viewport here looks fantastic. And then most importantly, we've truncated the entire texture set list back down to one texture set. Okay, one texture. Okay, instead of having 4, now I have 1. So we want to make sure that all the polygons are tagged appropriately. This gives us a really great functionality of grouping things here in Substance Painter quickly, but sometimes, you know, too many groups is just going to give us a really bad result, right? If I had kept all 4 of those previous materials associated with this object, it would have just made it a nightmare. It really would have. And I would have produced 4 times as many files on the output of this than was honestly needed. Pretty cool, huh? So let's take a second and just go back to Maya and revisit this little checklist that we need to go through. It's an important checklist, okay? First and foremost, got to have UVs for every single polygon, okay? Must have. Underscore it, highlight it, can't bypass this, okay? This is a system that's going to follow us the rest of the way through the game art pipeline. So got to have UVs, okay? Hard and soft edges, and you need to do a legit evaluation of your model to make sure that all of these hard and soft edge values have been applied to the edges of your mesh correctly. And you, like me, you have to kind of go through almost on every single one, you know, and say, okay, I don't like how it's smoothing out here. Let's select those edges. Even turn on symmetry because I'm being me here. Yeah. And assign them as soft. Already looking better. I'm going to keep this interior one, but look at all these in here. Oh, man, I got to fix that. See how every single one of these in here has a hard edge associated with it? I like the boundary loop having a hard edge because it's making it more chiseled, which is kind of what I'm after. But all of these fellers in here shouldn't be hard edges. They should be soft edges. Much better. Okay. Yeah.
When you're done retopologizing and all that kind of stuff, can you just go over it with just all soft and then just go and start selecting?
Great way to work too. Yep. 6 to 1, half dozen to another. There's a lot of different ways that we can get there, but yeah, that works fine too, for sure. Yes?
Earlier you mentioned that we can probably open up like an OBJ file in Substance Painter.
Uh-huh.
Does that mean that they have to have UV? Or
Got to have UVs. The whole purpose about going into Substance is to paint a texture, which requires UV maps.
OBJ files have UV?
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all OBJ files. If UVs have been created for that object, an OBJ file will include those UVs. Yep, it's part of the geometry. UVs are old school polygon technology, right? They've been around since the inception of this industry. To this day, it's amazing. You know, making UVs is kind of problematic. It takes some energy, it takes a little bit of time. And every year, someone's like, "Oh, I think I have an alternate way of, doing textures without UVs," and nothing ever really solves the problem as simply as a UV map does, right? All right. So, got to have UVs, got to have these hard and soft edges, and then specifically, we got to make sure that all of our polygons are assigned to an appropriate collection of materials. Okay, and you really got to think through it. How many textures am I going to use to describe the totality of this object? For an object like this, for me, just one texture set. Don't want to have more than one texture set. That's just going to turn into a nightmare. It's more than what I need. It really is. So you got to think through it. Okay. All right. Tell you what, I've been going for about an hour. Let's just take a small, little 5-minute break. We'll come back in and we'll start looking at how we can work with Substance Painter to start crafting the illusion for our character. Okay, so we left off right here for our little project. We've gone through our kind of export process little checklist, and now we're ready to start physically crafting our textures. Okay, so there's some thinking that we need to adopt here, and we need to really start kind of getting a game plan of how we're going to start attacking this. Okay, I know that my game plan includes having some really unique textures applied to the horns. I want the skin to be different. I want to maybe have some scales on the skin as well. All things that I can go in and continue to add with my substance system here in a minute. To make my life easier, I want to organize my layers palette for my texture set in a way that just gives me a lot of control over each one of these areas. So usually the first thing that I do is I start kind of separating things out and creating some good groups. Okay, I know I want a folder for all the horns. Okay, I know I want a folder for the skin. Maybe I have another folder for the eyes, right? That way I can very quickly manipulate these parts of the mesh, without having to worry about it. Okay. So I got to start organizing my layer stack just to give me the functionality that I'm after. However, before we jump into that, okay, I want to show you a really great feature called mesh maps that allows us to take existing geometry, high-resolution geometry, and then bake that into a whole series of textures that was going to aid in our texturing pipeline. Okay, and I think once you see me do it, and you'll see the output of it here in Substance, you'll go, aha, I understand, right? Let's go back over into Maya real fast. And again, just revisit that high-resolution sculpt that I was working on, okay? So I'm just going to hit Shift-H to unhide my high-res one. Super triangulated, can't really work with it in Substance, but I can use it to extract some high-resolution detail that I sculpted in, detail that wasn't in the low-res retopologized mesh, right? And the great thing about working with the retopology tools inside of Maya is that we know that all of the retopologized geometry is glued to that high-resolution mesh. QuadDraw does a great job of ensuring that all of that new geometry is placed at the exact same location as my high-res. So I should have some confidence in this process. Now, if you have changed your model, okay, after you retopologized it, if you've pushed and pulled verts around into a different location than the high-res mesh, this is fundamentally not going to work, okay? It needs to look like this. They need to be carbon copy clones of each other, right? Have to be in the exact same identical position. If you've monkeyed around with your retopologized mesh to after the fact, which is fine, okay, just note that this system isn't going to work for you, okay? The whole purpose of going through Mudbox is to create a high polygon mesh that has a lot of surface detail that we then retopologize into something of like medium resolution that we can texture and send into our real-time rendering engines, okay? So we shouldn't really be messing around with the mesh after we retopologize it, because that would change, we're making changes. Think of it like this, coming from the good old film days. Once you're done with Mudbox, you have like GeoLock, right? You've locked your geometry down. You're not going to make any changes to it. You're done modeling, right? Now it's about optimizing that mesh to make it work inside of a real-time rendering engine. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I want to export out this super crazy high-resolution mesh. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I want to hide my low-res. And on my high-res one, I'm going to select everything, or I'll just do it in object mode. And let's just soften all the edges so it smooths right. Yeah, that's better. Now I'm not getting a lot of that interior faceting that I had before. Okay, not that I'm like the world's best sculptor, but there's some good detail in here that I want to make sure shows up in my final mesh, right, over in Substance Painter. We're going to bake all of that high-res info to my low-res mesh over in Substance Painter. It's almost as if we're going to extract all that wonderful geometry and put it on my my low-res mesh over in Substance. Okay, so I want to export out my high-res. My high-res in the exact same fashion that I did earlier. It's not going to be Triceratops wrong. I should probably stop calling it. It's going to be Triceratops high. Now this is going to be a big file. This is going to be a huge, huge file. If we look at the high-res mesh, it's probably pretty big in file size. Yeah, 7.4 megabytes. That's a lot of geometry. Okay, so there's a lot of polygons in there. If we go back over, oops, wrong app. If we go back over in here in the Substance Painter, I now want to start using that high-res mesh as part of a process called mesh mapping. Okay, we're going to bake and extract that high-res information and bake it into a whole series of textures that are going to become members of my entire Substance kind of engine, which is a whole lot of fun. So let's go ahead and start that process. It's really easy to begin. If we begin over here in our shader settings, and it is not in our shader settings, and I always do this. Always do this because I'm a nerd and I'm so used to the old way. I apologize. Yeah. Texture set, settings. Right next. Yeah, and this is me used to seeing it over here. It's right here. I apologize. Thank you. Okay. This is the back end of your entire all the properties of your texture set. And down here at the bottom, see how it says bake mesh maps? Okay. This bake engine is going to create a whole series of kind of internally used textures that will aid in the texture creation process. Okay, there's a lot going on: normal maps, world space normals, identification maps, the ambient inclusion maps, which will create the little illusion of dirt and grime in the corners and the nooks and crannies of your geometry. It's pretty neat stuff, right? So let's start that process. Bake mesh maps. You'll get this little popover, and I'll be honest with you, there's not too many parameters in here that you need to change off the bat, okay? For a first and second and third time out, just leave these options as they are. Algorithmic has done a great job in making sure that the defaults are pretty good defaults. If you're an advanced user, then you're probably going to dig into this and start resolving some of the problems that your mesh creation or your mesh map creation system is giving you. But for today, we're going to keep it pretty simple. The only suggestion that I would give you as far as the properties goes is to ensure that your output size of these new texture maps match the texture set resolution. The resolution of the texture set that we're creating is 2048, so we want to generate these internally used mesh maps at the same resolution as the texture set itself. So 2048 is a good starting point. Okay. All right. So the next thing that you have to do, see it says high poly parameters. We need to load in that high poly mesh right here, and that's what this little file icon is for. Okay. Here's Triceratops high. Let's open it on up, and really, that's all you got to do, right? Something that I do just because I'm a nerd in my ambient inclusion rays. I always put my secondary rays to like 256. That's a good place to begin. The ambient occlusion. Yeah, go ahead. Enable seams. Great suggestion as well. So enable seams, ambient occlusion to 256. This is just going to make the bake time go a lot longer, but the quality of it's going to be pretty high, right? The ambient occlusion engine is going to create kind of like little rays. It's going to fire off little dots inside of the scene, and where those rays collect in the armpits and the eyes, we're going to get shadow information, and it's going to look really rad. Okay. So I'm going to leave it at 40. It's going to be real kind of grainy. The way to resolve that grain is just to increase the rays. But I'll keep it at 40 just so it kind of goes through the process faster. So let's bake it. It's going to take some time to bake. So what it's going through, and it's evaluating the mesh, and it's running a whole series of geometric evaluations of our scene. And it's creating some textures that are used on the back end of Substance to make now you can see the ambient occlusion just popped in. See how all the shadows and the nooks and crannies of my Triceratops look a little bit darker now? That's the ambient occlusion map being applied. And boom, check out my eyeball, right? No, seriously. Check out check out my nostril. Okay? Do you guys see it? All that lovely shadow information on the inside of the nostril, that's coming from the mesh map system, right? It's coming from that ambient occlusion bake that we just performed. This little wrinkle here on the nostril, that wasn't there. That's not there in the geometry, right? Shoot, let me select the mesh real fast. Okay, that's the wireframe of my mesh. Because I've taken that high-resolution sculpt from Mudbox and is incorporated into the mesh map baking system, I'm able to extract that high-res geo and bake it into texture information on the model itself, which is pretty cool. Okay. Now, on the back end of Substance Painter, it's going to access all of those maps. And it created a whole bunch of them for us, right? Let me show you where they live. They live down here in our library under the project section. And check it out. These are all the maps that it just created. Here's your ambient occlusion map. These are physical images that it created. And you can access these images and continue to edit them if you'd like. Yeah.
What's up with the error message there? Because you got it baked and you have a bunch of new data on the mesh, but it says that there's not enough data.
I'm going to guess that it's probably that surface ID map, that it didn't see any sort of color information or vertex color information on that particular channel. So it said abort and gave me an error. Big picture, the yellow errors are not showstoppers. It's the red errors that you need to be mindful of. It's not going to crash, but you just need to be, that's really a show-stopping problem. Okay. So the cool thing about working with all of these mesh maps is ambient occlusion is neat. That's going to create the illusion of little of dark areas, of shadows and grime, where we can use kind of dirt and what have you. But what's most interesting, okay, and probably most important about this entire thing are the curvature and thickness maps, okay? The Substance engine is pretty rad in that it's going to take all of these mesh maps and apply them to certain channels for certain presets. Let me show you, I think, probably the best example of this. Okay, this curvature map's pretty neat. Here's all the normal information that's coming from, think of this like a crazy bump map. This is global positioning, thickness, world space normals. We're going to access all of this stuff for our models, okay, or for our textures. Let me just show you what this looks like and why this is important, okay? All right, so looking pretty good. I got some big time problems here on my horns. I got to figure out what's causing that. It could be just the resolution, but I got some issues in there that I need to resolve, okay? Could be resolution, could just be the ambient occlusion engine, could be an errant property that I didn't change in the mesh map baking properties. So I got to go in and fix that stuff, or at least kind of resolve that. But let me show you the benefit of working inside this playground, okay? I'm going to go into the Smart Materials section of my library, okay? These Smart Materials are pretty neat because these Smart Materials are going to access all of those mesh maps that we just created. And it's going to create some really cool effects based on the details of those mesh maps, okay? Let's do this. Let's change the thumbnail size to large. And let's do this. Let's do a simple one. Let's do bronze armor. To load in a preset, just left click and drag it over into your layer stack. And it's going to load it in. Boof. All right, and now I have a lovely bronze statue, okay? Now, as I zoom in and get close here, you see where the texture illusion is changing on the edges here? That's not thanks to just the default image that's been applied to the layer here. This is in part due to the masking system that the mesh maps are doing on the back end. If we explore the contents of this preset by opening up the folder, look at all this stuff that's coming in here. And these edges, okay, this is accessing all those mesh maps that it just created. The curvature map and the thickness maps are being loaded as a mask for that specific channel automatically for us, okay? So like, for example, let's get rid of bronze armor. Let's do good old medieval steel. Oh, that's not the one I thought it was. Steel stained, I'm sorry, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, steel stained is pretty good. See how it's We're getting a lot of that brown speckly kind of illusion right in here. See how it's different? That's because of the ambient occlusion map that we just baked with our mesh map system. It's filtering, it's masking things in the back end for us automatically to get us these really, really, really great results pretty quickly. Okay? Let's see, I think steel gun. Yeah, steel gun is probably the best example of it, right? Okay, where it's silver and where it's like chipped off.
Those are the high points.
Yeah, those are the high points, right? Yep, and because we had that curvature map, the ambient occlusion map, the thickness map that the mesh map system gave us, we're able to do this quickly. Okay? So this is why we want to go through this process as much as we can, because it opens up a lot of doors. Now I got a wood one. I got some work in here that I need to do to kind of get rid of some of these seams. The wood grain on this particular project file is not wood walnut. I'm just playing around now. That's fun. Oh, steel tank. Triceratops are like tanks.
I thought that was Ankylosaurus.
Huh?
Isn't that an Ankylosaurus? It's more like a tank. That's what they always say.
They're all, yeah, yes, yeah. Cool, huh? Pretty neat. Yeah, look at this. I'm not doing this. This is a whole series of images that are being masked based off of the information that the mesh map system gave us, right? It's pretty great. It's pretty great. So bake your mesh maps first. All right. Okay, so I got my mesh maps baked, and as I mentioned before, I'm going to start going in and really quickly organizing my entire layer stack to allow me to prototype this texture extraordinarily fast. Last week we talked a lot about masking, right? And if you can master masking inside of Substance Painter or any app for that matter, doors are going to open for you, okay? It really is the entryway into a lot of powerful functionality in our apps. So let's just create the groups first, okay? I love these folders. So let's just call this one horns. I'll create another folder for skin, and then a third folder for the eyes. Okay, what I want to do is not just have folders, but I want to mask the folder. So whatever goes inside this folder is automatically going to be masked out and filtered to the polygons that are associated with the mask. So for the eyes, for example, let's add a black mask. Okay, and they're in there somewhere. Yep, there they are. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit the 4 key on my keyboard, which brings up the polygon paint tool. Okay, and down here in the polygon fill options, I'm going to, I can individually select triangles if I'd like, or we can do it by entire meshes or by UV islands, which is kind of exactly what I want. Come on, there it is. Now it worked. Now I think I got more than one. It's difficult to see at the moment what's being masked out, right? So there's a couple ways that we can combat this problem. How do I know what this mask is influencing? What polygons inside of my scene that mask is influencing? Say again? It is because of the UV map, but is there a way that I can maybe engineer a really obvious understanding as to what this folder and its corresponding mask is doing? A couple things, and this is a good way of working. Right now, our viewer is looking at the total material, okay? However, we can go in and say, just show me the mask, okay? Oop, went back to base color, I apologize. Yeah, and now I can see exactly the polygons that mask is doing, and whoops, I grabbed the eyeball and the head at the exact same time. Luckily for me, the solution is pretty easy. If I just change my color to black, okay, I'm still in that UV world, I just click on that UV island, and huzzah. Okay, let's put it back to white, click on the eye, yep, things are pretty good. Hit the M key to go back to material, and now let's go down to skin, do the exact same thing, add a black mask. Look at the mask, oops, I missed it. I'm just going to click on that one. I'm just going to click on everything that it's going to have be influenced by the skin. I think I got it. Oops. I got some UV issues going on over there that I need to resolve. Maybe. We'll come back and see what that looks like here in a second. Well, let's be sure. Let's be really, really sure. Let's put it to black. Yeah, that's something else going on. So we'll have to investigate. I had larger problems with my horns to begin with, but things are going well. Let's add a black mask to the horns layer. Look at its mask channel. That one's easy. Grab those guys. Now the reason I'm going through this, oh yeah, it's a UV map problem. See how it's not working the way it did with the other? Autosave. Come on now. Shoot, I may not have UVs for this one. I may have goofed. Made a mistake on my end. So we'll just ignore the problem for the time being. Keep moving along. Now this top level, folder level masking system allows us to work fast and to prototype a design pretty quickly, right? Of course, I don't have the toes. I'll have to figure that out later. The M key to go back to material. The 1 key to go back to our standard paintbrush. And now we can see what it is that we're working with here, okay? Because check it out. Now I can work very quickly. This is going to be fun. I'm just going to use some of these smart materials as presets to illustrate this idea. Maybe I want to have the skin be this lovely rubber eraser. That's awesome, right? And look what it's not applying that smart material to, right? This has everything to do with that top level folder mask. Whatever goes in the folder is going to be masked out by that mask right there, so it allows me to iterate and add new information quickly, right? Maybe on the eyes are going to be bronze armor. Why not? There he goes. Okay. The horns are going to be fabric woodland. Why not? It's awesome. Okay. See where I'm going there? It allows me to very quickly apply some presets and work intelligently, right? Because those folder level masks are now influencing everything that's inside that folder, right? Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. Can't recommend you organize your project file by these folders enough. It allows you to work fast. Right? Or maybe just like a gigantic rubber eraser. That's kind of what I was thinking. It's awesome. Demon skin, right? I think there's, let's see. Let's do this. This is going to be fun. Oh, I'm so used to having all of my, here we go. How about skin feverish? Huh? That's awesome. These presets are a great place to start, right? They're not really a great place to end. You never want to use a preset in your final design, but at least gets you kind of going in the right direction. You know, everyone has access to these presets. The worst thing you can do, that's cool. The worst thing that you could do is to have a portfolio piece entirely textured with presets, right? Because everyone has these presets, and the people that are reviewing your portfolio are like, I think I've seen that texture somewhere. It's because everyone uses it, right? But they're oftentimes a good starting point, okay? A good way to kind of get our brain working around the problem, if you will, of our model. Here's a burlap texture. Same with the materials. There's a lot of materials that ship with Unity, or what's this? Human female 30s? Let's. Okay, I got to do it. Yes, that is weird. Look, there's her ear right there. Okay, no, we're not going to do that. Yeah. Iron chainmail. Oops, I put it in the wrong folder. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So,
Make it smaller.
yeah, so this actually brings me to the next point, how we can edit some of these presets, because this is a good place to begin, right? But clearly the preset isn't working on this part of the object itself. I'm not saying don't use presets, because I use them all the time.
Don't just like drag them and be like, all right, cool.
Done. Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. Right.
Make it your own.
Make it your own, make it special, and make it contextual, right? And luckily for us, these substances are very customizable. But if you want to make something smaller, of course, I got that preset selected. See how we have scale, UV scale? That's the value that we need to kind of adjust. And as we start to drag this, oops, went the wrong way. There we go. Now it makes,
Make it look ready for battle.
there it is. Cool, huh? I'm not sure if it's a chainmail dinosaur or what. I think there's a really great crocodile skin one in here. Lizard scales, yeah, this will probably work in the context of what it is that we're doing.
Run a realistic one.
There's lizard scales. Still not good, but at the very least, now we're inside the context of a dinosaur, right?
Make it orange.
Huh?
Make it orange.
Orange? Okay, I can make it orange. There we go. Orangey.
No,
Voila.
You were nice before you were
He's not going to survive in the wild, right? He's going to get eaten pretty quickly.
no. He can protect himself.
What does all damage look like in the presets? Is that what kind of?
It looks like it had
Which one?
rust.
It was in the multiple presets.
Multiple shaders you can like kind of turn up and down. And, like,
Oh, yeah.
so you can have one with like scorched and then you have scorched with all that exposed.
Yeah, and there was another one. Let's see. Yeah, so let's do this just to kind of illustrate that idea. I'm going to get rid of my lizard scales and my chainmail, okay? And this kind of speaks to the building up of substance in these presets and customizing it. Maybe I want to control what the color is going to be a little bit more directly, right? Well, I can just put it in a fill layer, put it inside my skin. Okay, now I'm in control of the color. Let's just make it red. Why not? Not red. Okay, there we go. At least a darker shade of red. Okay. Well, some of these presets only access certain channels of the substance itself, right? Because these substance presets are going to be loading information into a whole series of different channels. Color is one. Height is kind of like displacement or bump. Roughness, that's the specularity of our object. Metalness and normal all kind of have an impact. We talked about that, all those channels last week. Okay. There's one under smart materials, and they're all over the place. Let's see if I can find it real fast. Not hull damage. There's one that's just called panels, I believe. Also could be thinking about. Let's see. Here, let's do this. Let's go to the carbon fiber one. And I'm going to throw the carbon fiber one into the mix too. Now, it's going to make it go black, but on that carbon fiber, I could come down. Maybe I like the texture. I don't like the texture. Let's make it smaller. That's pretty rad. Okay. Maybe I want all of that height information, but I don't want it to be black. I want it to be red. Okay. Well, on that carbon fiber preset, right, I can turn off its color and say, just give me the height information. Okay. Turn off the metallic. Okay. And now, normal we need, yeah, now I'm just getting, isn't that rad? I'm getting the color from this one, but then all the height and normal information from the carbon fiber, which is pretty rad. Oops, I accidentally turned the height off. Isn't that cool? So we can mix and match these. This is the way we can start building it up to get the illusion that we're after. So yeah. Okay, other questions on some cool substance stuff? So we're adding a new level of detail into this, right? With the mesh maps, the group folders.
Can we do the turning on the environment?
Yes, turning on the environment. That is shader property. Not shader properties. I'm sorry. So viewport display properties. Yeah, here we go. Viewport properties, environment settings, environment opacity.
Oh, okay, so it's there.
Yep, it's here.
It was so simple again.
Yeah, the blur. And some folks really like having the environment on in the background. I say go crazy, whatever works for you, right? I can turn the shadows on. I really like having the shadows off, by the way.
And we can import anything else in our environment, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Specific. The special images.
Yeah, they just have to be reflection maps, 360-degree images. You just can't.
Special images.
Yep. Yeah, they come with a whole bunch.
Website for that.
There really is, yeah. HDR Haven, HDRI Haven, excuse me, is a great one. It's a really great resource.
Something 360 here.
Yep, right, yep.
They're like, please donate $1.
Yeah, give them a cup of coffee. You know, it's a pay as you go kind of thing, or pay what you want type website. Support those guys and gals as much as you can. They're providing you guys with some excellent resources for free. Whenever I've used a couple of their images for professional stuff in the past, and I always throw them $5, $10. That's the right thing to do. Buy them a cup of coffee. Let them go out and have a movie night with their spouse or loved one. All right. Other questions on working in Substance Painter? As I mentioned before, this is in no way the complete conversation about Substance Painter. Every time we open up Substance Painter, we're going to take another step into detail. Okay. This week is about importing our own custom geometry from Maya, going through our export checklist from Maya, importing and creating the file here correctly inside of Substance Painter, and then baking those mesh maps. Okay, those mesh maps are the keys to the kingdom when it comes to working with Substance Painter. They are great. They are really great. Okay, so our homework this week is to do basically what I just did, right, or what we just kind of prescribed. If you go over to Canvas real fast, you can see under the Week 9 folder that our exclusive homework assignment this week is to, in fact, go in and, of course, add textures to the human character model that we've been working on for the past month. This is it. This is the final part of this project. So if you've been ready to move on, this is it. We're going to be moving on next week. We're going to be looking at something different for a bit. Okay. So please make sure you go through the checklist. And when you're done, just make a simple iRay render like we did last time and publish that iRay render back at the Dropbox here on Canvas. Okay. I don't want your Substance Painter project file. It gets quite big. Okay. Let me.
My JTron was like 65 megabytes.
Yeah, it gets quite big. Shoot. Let me just. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I was to save this, because now I have a whole series of 2K mesh maps. Let's save it real fast. Without any real work done on this feller. Check it out. Here's my Substance Painter project file, and it is 215 megabytes. Okay. And I really haven't done anything. Yeah. I literally have SPP files that are in the gigabytes of size. Yeah, they can get huge. So I don't want your Substance Painter project file. Just give me an iRay render when you're done. Sound good? Yes. All right, let's get to work. And I'll help people during lab resolve the technical issues with their model.